Hey, what's up guys, it's Hoodamaniac360, and today I'm going to be reviewing Spider-Man 1. So let's get this started. Alright, so before I want to get into the review, I just want to explain why I'm reviewing this. So for those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, Super Bowl Sunday was my birthday, and I got Spider-Man 3 on DVD as my birthday present, and I wanted to rewatch the entire trilogy. And for those of you who don't know, Spider-Man 1, which is this one, Spider-Man 1 is my favorite movie of all time. And I thought, what could be better than to celebrate my birthday by watching Spider-Man 1? And there's going to be those people that say, but having your birthday on the Super Bowl is the greatest thing of all time. Well, no it's not. Not for me. I don't watch football. I don't really like sports that much other than like table tennis, bowling, golf, a little bit of baseball here and there, but whatever. So yeah, let's review this. So like I said in the beginning of this video, Spider-Man 1 is my favorite movie of all time. And that is because I used to watch this film over and over again when I was a little kid. And rewatching this film now, it holds up extremely well. In fact, I think it's better for me as an adult than it was when I was a kid. And that is because I found Peter Parker extremely relatable. Peter Parker is a nerd, he's quiet, no one really talks to him. And I was exactly like that when I was in high school. And I guess you could say I'm still kind of like that. And I know that that's what he was like in the comics, but Tobey Maguire somehow played the role of Spider-Man extremely well. And I mean extremely well. I think Tobey Maguire is still to this day the best Spider-Man actor we've ever had. So the story for this film is Spider-Man's origin. But before we get into that, let me introduce you to some of the other characters. There's Harry Osborn, who's Peter's best friend, Norman Osborn, who is Harry's father, and who's also a scientist that wishes Harry was more like Peter because Peter is smarter than Harry and can do things Harry can't. And he's also the villain of this movie, the Green Goblin. So Harry was also kind of jealous of Peter in that department. And there's also Mary Jane, who's Peter's crush, and Aunt May and Uncle Ben, who's Peter's guardians. It's never revealed who their parents are. So what happens is Peter's class goes on a field trip to a science lab, and Peter gets bit by a radioactive spider. And when he gets home, he goes to lie down because he doesn't really feel well. Meanwhile, at the science lab Norman works in, him and his team are working on a glider that could benefit the U.S. military. But they're having difficulties, and they're also on a time limit. So Norman decides to test it on himself, and it goes horribly, horribly wrong. He turns into the Green Goblin, and we'll get into him a little bit later, and he accidentally kills his assistant. So the next morning, Peter wakes up and notices that he's perfectly fine after the spider bite. He also grew muscles, he's a lot faster now, but the weirdest thing is he can now shoot webs. He figured that out after doing this.
What happened is that? It's freaking weird. Did you see that? Parker?
And of course, this pisses off the bully, and he tries to beat him up, but he fails miserably. Then Peter runs out of the school out of embarrassment, and then discovers that all that was because of the spider bite. And he realizes he can now crawl on walls, has a high jump. And I absolutely love this scene where he tries to learn how to swing webs. Watch what happens.
Tally ho.
And after doing all that shit, Peter comes home late and has a nice talk with Mary Jane. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, him and Mary Jane are next door neighbors, if you were wondering. And also, Peter has a huge crush on Mary Jane, like I said before. So they're talking, and Peter has a feeling that she might like him, and he wants to impress her by buying a car. But to get the money, he joins a wrestling league for one night. When the day comes, he doesn't want to tell his aunt and uncle about the wrestling match. So he tells them he's going to the library, and his uncle volunteers to drive him. When they get there, he tells them that he knows about the fight he had at school, and tells them that with great power comes great responsibility. Peter gets out of the car, Uncle Ben drives away, and Peter goes to the wrestling match where he has at least 3 minutes with his opponent. He beats him, but unfortunately the owner only gives him $100 because, yeah, New Yorkers are like that. Then the owner gets robbed and Peter lets him go, which was a huge mistake for Peter because that guy ends up shooting Uncle Ben, and Peter watches him die. Peter chases the robber down and he kills him. A little while later, Peter, Harry, and Mary Jane graduate high school, and Mary Jane breaks up with her boyfriend. And Harry, whom also has a crush on Mary Jane, ends up dating her, and Peter becomes Spider-Man, and becomes so popular that he ends up in the paper. And we're introduced to this guy, Jonah Jameson, played amazingly by J.K. Simmons. I personally think he was born to play this role. Then again, there are a few actors that are in this film that I think were perfect for their roles too, so whatever. Anyway, moving on, Peter decides to take pictures of him as Spider-Man and turn them into the Daily Bugle, which is the paper that Mr. Jameson owns, and Peter ends up getting a job there. Meanwhile, with Norman, he ends up getting fired because of business reasons, and he gets his superiors back by killing them during a parade while he's the Green Goblin. And speaking of the Green Goblin, the actor who plays him, Willem Dafoe, was another actor that was perfect for his role. Eventually, Spider-Man shows up and they fight, and a lot of people say this fight was bad because of the effects. While I'll admit that it's not really the best effects, but honestly, bad effects don't really bother me too much. You see, when I watch a movie, I don't judge it by its effects. I judge it for story, characters, and its world building. Those are the 3 most important parts of making a film, or a franchise as you call it. The next few minutes is just Spider-Man taking down random criminals and saving people, including him saving Mary Jane. And Peter and Mary Jane end up sharing the iconic upside down kiss. Then things get a little more interesting when Spider-Man saves a baby from a burning building, and he realizes that there's someone still up there, and it turns out to be the Green Goblin. And he throws these mini bombs at Spider-Man that have these razor blades in them, and Spider-Man dodges all of them, except for one. That gives him a small cut in his arm. After the fight, the next scene immediately changes to a Thanksgiving setting, where Harry wants to introduce Norman to Mary Jane. So things are going okay until Norman sees the cut from the burning building fight that was on Peter before. And his goblin senses tell him that Peter is Spider-Man, and because of that, he excuses himself and leaves. Later that night, he wants to emotionally break Peter, so he, as the Green Goblin, attacks Aunt May and nearly giving her a heart attack, causing her to go to the hospital. When Peter arrives, he realizes that it was the Goblin because Aunt May says this.
Those eyes! Those horrible yellow eyes!
He knows who I am.
After a little while, Mary Jane shows up, and her and Peter are talking, and Peter sort of accidentally admits that he has a crush on her, and Harry arrives, and he starts to realize what's going on and leaves. He tells Norman what happened, and he tells Harry that he's going to make it up to him. And he does that by kidnapping Mary Jane, putting her on top of a bridge, and plotting to kill her, Peter, and one of those zip lines that's full of children. You know, those things that are in the city. And Spider-Man shows up and successfully saves both Mary Jane and the kids. The Green Goblin takes Spider-Man to some kind of abandoned building, and he beats the living shit out of him. in a really brutal and realistic way. Then the Green Goblin says he's gonna kill him. He's gonna kill both him and Mary Jane in a slow and painful way. Peter gains a boost of power because of this, and he beats the shit out of the Green Goblin. And it looks like he's gonna kill him. The Green Goblin unmasks himself and tries to tell Peter that the Green Goblin was trying to take over, but Peter isn't stupid and he knows that Norman is evil. So Norman gets his glider, which has a blade in it, and it's behind Peter. It goes to kill him, but Peter jumps out of the way and it gets Norman. Now, people have said over and over again that the final battle between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin was violent, but no one has ever commented on how Norman dies. For those of you who haven't seen the movie, watch what happens.
Peter. Don't tell Harry.
Yep, Peter gets stabbed right in the balls. What's weird is I think I'm the only one that has ever commented on that kill, at least to my own knowledge. I'm not sure if anyone else has ever commented on it, but whatever. So later at Norman's funeral, Harry tells Peter that he knows Spider-Man killed his father and that he wants to find and kill Spider-Man. Then Mary Jane tells Peter that her and Harry broke up and now she wants to be with him. Wow, and at a funeral too. Peter respectfully declines and says that they'll still be friends because he has a lot of responsibility being Spider-Man, which of course he doesn't tell her. And that's the movie. Like I said before, this film is my favorite movie of all time because I used to watch this film over and over again when I was a little kid, and it always stuck with me. Rewatching it now, it holds up better for me than it did when I was a kid because the story is great, the characters are great, every actor did a fantastic job, and of course, I'm going to give Spider-Man 1 a 10 out of 10. Alright you guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe, comment down below what you want me to review in the future, subscribe to my other two channels, follow me on Twitter, the links are in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next video where I will review Spider-Man 2. Later.